Good day, everybody. You registered for the Drive Inspirational Talk on Living Labs that we're going to have next week on Tuesday. And on beforehand, we would like to share how we regard Living Labs to function so that we are all on the same page with that as we will enter our interesting talk with two experts who have a lot of experience in working in Living Labs and running them. My name is Roel Kamerling, and I will be the moderator of the session next week. So let's dive in. First of all, labs, it's just another type of Living Labs, is just another type of labs. So it will be a physical space where you can go to. It is meant for experimentation, and it is used and owned by people. And these are important things to consider when you talk about Living Labs. The difference with a normal lab, where it is a artificial setting, that this is a real life setting. So you are either in a hospital, in a supermarket, in a living area, airport, or at a university campus, doesn't matter. In this case, it's my own at TU Delft. And what you're doing in the Living Lab is running experimentation. First of all, you can find the needs of people there in the Living Lab area. So that's very different than from a normal lab, because there are just people living there, working there, being treated, etc. And you can make use of that to find their needs. And in the end, what you will gain is a showcase for the solution that you created for the pressing needs. You will have a final product that has gone through some iterations. You might have found your first customer, and most important, especially in healthcare, you were able to provide evidence that it's working and that it is safe. So what do you do in a Living Lab? First of all, together with the people living, working, or being treated there, you can do co-research to find their needs. This is an example of what happens in a Living Lab. Next phase is then that you go back to your workshop or whatever, and you start making stuff that will address the needs of the people that you have found. You go back to the Living Lab with a prototype and do some first testing. You confront your users with your prototype. Probably it has a lot of duct tape or tie wrap still connected to it. And you will get your first feedback. And with that, you do a number of iterations that will provide you with next prototypes. And if you finally found the one that is really working, you can do some validation tests. And with these tests, you can prove actually that it works, that it's safe. And this is, I put it down very simple, but this might take months to years to do this, but it will be very effective as a Living Lab. But it's important to keep in mind that you organize your Living Lab well. So you must take into account that someone is really owning the place and giving access to the Living Lab to facilitate access, but to keep it organized as well. So you need to have a process in place for when the potential users of the Living Lab call. So what happens then? What process of decision making takes place on how people can use it? So that's an important thing to consider, but also who is paying for it? For instance, if you want to use the operation theater, or you want to make use of a software platform, or you want to have access to nurses or do tests with patients where you need hospital staff as well, who is going to pay for all of that, and how much? Can you create some vouchers for that, innovation vouchers in your region? All these kinds of things you can consider. And this is what we're going to discuss in the Inspirational Talk. So how do you do that? But also, why do people do that? So what's in it for the doctors? What's in it for the institutes? and what makes it worthwhile to do these investments in setting up a living lab. So we would like to welcome you on Tuesday at 10 o'clock, and we're looking forward to it.
I think we should start because I see 2/3 of the registrant people are here. So I'm sure more will arrive, and
yes,
I give the floor to Roel and Maarten.
Okay, then we will start. Thank you, Petra. Welcome everybody to this inspirational talk on living labs. I'm actually quite excited about the people who registered, but also, of course, with the speakers that we have with us today. And the topic in itself, living labs, it's quite a powerful instrument in what we are trying to do here in building ecosystems. It can be, actually. So there are many people working on living labs, and it's a struggle as well. I'm sure Maarten and Pekka will share some of the struggles as well that they have seen. But we also see that a lot of interesting new products and services are actually coming from working in living labs. So that's what we're going to discuss today. We will dive into what it is, but even more about how to set it up, how to run it, and also why do people want to have one? So it costs time, it costs money, it costs resources, and still people are happy to work in it. So why is that? And all of this is for the participants and ourselves to learn about how we can do similar things. That's what the drive training is meant for. That all of us in our regions working on setting up innovation ecosystems to learn about how you can do it. So it's not only about to hear about the successes of others, but also to get a better understanding of how did you manage to do that, and perhaps also how can we collaborate on that. That's what the drive training is for. And I'm happy to see that on the registry list, I think we had almost 80 people registered, coming from all of the RIS hubs, coming from Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, and it's a great group to have together here. We will ask Maarten and Pekka shortly to introduce themselves, and they will give a few examples of what they are doing in their living lab. And then there's ample time for Q&A. So I would like to suggest that we will have the introduction first by Maarten and Pekka, and after that we'll do a Q&A session. So please feel free to raise your hand or to type things in the chat. Nora will also keep an eye on that so that we are sure to see all of the questions that are coming forward. And don't hesitate to reach out. So with that being said, of course, you've seen that this session is being recorded for the newcomers. So be sure to take that in mind if you ask any questions. And with that, I would like to go to our two speakers. So Maarten and Pekka, we had introduction talks last week, and both of you mentioned, without me suggesting it even, the word innovation ecosystem. I would like to ask you to say a few words about that, so that we can get to know you a bit better. So first of all, Maarten, we know each other already for quite some time. Maarten is a surgeon in one of the largest hospitals here in the Netherlands, but he's also a professor at TU Delft in patient safety. And maybe Maarten, can you say, by introducing yourself a bit, about your innovation ecosystem? Who are the two most important people for you that you collaborate with in your ecosystem that make your innovation work possible? Who are important people for you to work with? Can you say something about that?
Yes.
And then describe your ecosystem.
Thank you, Roel, for your kind invitation. And as you said, we work a long time together on innovation in the medical field. As a surgeon, of course, I'm really interested in technique and safety and the combination of that. So the people I would say would be very important for us is, for instance, the principal officer in the hospital. So your whole hospital staff has to work with you to enable you to do research and to introduce new technology in a safe manner. So the hospital management is a very important factor for us. And the other factor is, the other person is the patient, because the patient has strict ideas of themselves about safety and of innovations, and they should give you informed consent, but also it's a very interesting party to talk to about what they expect from technical innovations and from the healthcare system, because patients expect healthcare to improve and to get safer and to get less bothered by it and less painful and less time consuming. So the patient is a very interesting partner as well for us.
So if you work with maybe scientists or students or companies to do some sort of innovation project, you will include patients as well with that in that process.
A patient panel, either through internet to ask them questions, or invite them into the hospital and talk to them. And that's not a problem. Patients are very willing to cooperate. For instance, we did it when we introduced our Da Vinci robot for prostatectomies. We had a patient panel and we discussed it a lot. And it works very well. So I would advise you all to, as an ecosystem, I like the word very much because it's alive and it's dynamic. It changes all the time. And that's what happens when you start to innovate in a hospital, and also to create a safe context for innovation. So you need a lot of people, but you have to accept that it's a live concept. And for instance, regulations change. They're getting stricter and stricter. So you have to adhere to that. It's very important that you follow all the rules when you innovate in a hospital. And also you have to withstand a lot of pressure. Sorry, go ahead.
So sorry, Maarten, I know you're gonna talk about this for an hour. And we are just at the introduction part, so I would like to go to Pekka first, and then we will certainly get back to the regulations. So maybe Pekka, for you the same question. So you work at the Helsinki University Hospital. And you're part of the technology transfer office. But could you say something about your ecosystem? Who are you collaborating with in doing your work?
Yeah, thanks, Roel. So my background being more on the engineering and data side, so I'm looking at the ecosystem development from a bit different angle than Maarten and the physicians. Our quest for a couple of years has been to make our hospital more data driven, meaning that in a big hospital there is lots of accumulated data which have been gathered for decades. It has been used primarily for treating individual patients and then getting some operative reporting. And now how to harness that data into creating more value has been a program in the hospital for 6-7 years now. And there maybe the two most important roles are one of senior leadership sponsoring. So my boss, the chief digital officer, member of the executive group of the hospital, is the main sponsor of this activity, saying that data can and should be used in versatile manners. and also that we should engage in collaboration with partners and stakeholders also outside the hospital, be it industry, be it academic partners. Of course, following the regulation and the rules, but by nature, hospitals are more risk averse and cautious in this context than like risk taking and entrepreneurial. So the senior sort of strategic direction that this is something we want to do, and this is something that can be done in a good governance setting. So that's very important. The other key person is maybe the practical coordinator of this type of activity. So we are building an ecosystem where different kind of partners are being attached to. So we need a person who is able to navigate both the sort of industrial mindset and the clinical mindset. And that's often a scarce combination. Fortunately, our program director in our ecosystem has this background. So she's a midwife in basic training, has been working in a clinical setting, and then she's been working in consultancy and in IT business, and has also economic education in background. So she combines these both two roles and can really coordinate and navigate this quite complex set of mindsets in a university clinicians and industry partners, and find common ground for concrete projects and actions.
Thank you. That's a great example. I think also of one of the things I shared in a movie that I shared with the participants on beforehand, that you need someone who is the owner of the Living Lab, and who takes responsibility for the process of people that want to come in and make use of the Living Lab or of the facilities, and understands the processes. So this is a key person, if I hear you correctly. With that, I would like to tie back for a second to what I think is a crucial slide, and that's this one, about the Living Labs, before we dive into the examples that Maarten and Pekka will be sharing. So if we see Living Labs as a service, as a facility, then this is what you get from a Living Lab. So if you want to go to a Living Lab, this is what you can get there. So you see on the first side, you see needs and people here. So these are the people that Maarten was talking about as well. So these are surgeons, patients, but also nurses or the financial manager of the hospital. And you can find people here that have problems, that have needs, and you can do research in a Living Lab. So you get access as a company or as a researcher on what is going on in a hospital, what needs can you find there. And based on these needs, you can go home, you make specs and try to come up with a solution and make the solution, first prototype, and you go back to the Living Lab and you talk again with the people that have these needs and see whether you are able to, and did your solution, the thing that you come up with, is it relevant for them? You can ask that, you can get feedback on your first prototype, and probably, so this is still a duct tape, tie wrap type of prototype, but then you go back and you adjust your prototype and you go back again until you are able to do some real validation tests. So is your solution actually in real practice, is it addressing the needs that you started out with? And with that, if you are able to prove that, you have a showcase, you have your final product in hand, possibly you have your first customer in the hospital that you work with, or this can also be a residential area, or it can be a nursing home. So it depends a bit on the setting that you've selected to do your Living Lab. But the most important thing maybe, which Maarten stressed already as well in our pre-talk, is about the evidence and the proof that it's working and safe. So this is what we're going to talk about today. So the Living Lab as a setting where these types of things can happen, but then also about the ownership that Pekka was mentioning. Someone needs to run the place, and that's quite crucial as well. So how do you do that? And with that, I would like to go to the first example. Let's start with Maarten. Maarten prepared a movie for us. Maybe you can introduce it, Maarten, and then Petra can show it.
Yeah, well, we've worked with a lot of companies, academics, doctors, and patients on several projects. And I would like to give you two examples. One is with a small startup who came with us to develop the project, to do some prototype testing, and then adjust the prototype and get, let's say, a market-ready proposition. And that was so that's, you work with 4 or 5 people on that, small group, small funds, not a lot of money, and they needed a few thousand euros to build the first prototype. And then we went to the whole process, we went to the all legal process with them, and so it was a very interesting and learning experience, which I can all advise you to do. And,
so maybe just let's now run the movie.
Yeah, that's the introduction.
And then, yeah.
As a trauma surgeon in a big education hospital, we came into serious problems when COVID hit, and we were in need of innovative devices which enables us to keep our teaching up to standard. And because of our innovation platform, we connected to Crescent as a hospital.
Our vision is to accelerate the digital transition of healthcare education. This is why we developed a smart head cam with Crescent Vision. We're using a wide angle to immerse the viewer into the operating room, and we have a zoom lens to really show the detail of the surgical procedure in the operating room.
I do like to help to improve these educational tools because we really need them now and in the future.
Okay, we need to show these movies throughout Europe, so maybe it was a bit hampering here and there, but I think we've all seen what this, what in the end the innovation was. But maybe Maarten, can you say a few words about, you say the innovation platform in the movie. So how did you come in contact with this startup? How did they manage to reach out to you?
Yeah, well, the innovation platform is our fundamental idea about how to get startups at your hospital, how to work with companies, small and big. And the innovation platform consists of all people, all types of people in the hospital. So there are ICT guys, there are managers, there are financial people, there are a lot of doctors, nurses, everybody is in the innovation platform. And it runs every 2 weeks. And startups come there to pitch their ideas. And then they ask us a very simple question. Sometimes they want some money. Sometimes they just want a conversation with an experienced nurse. Sometimes they want to try out a new idea and stuff like that. So an innovation platform where all disciplines of the hospital are represented is a very important way to get your startups to you. And to be honest, you only keep your staff in the hospital interested in a living lab if there's a very normal flow of startups coming in every year. So you have to keep on innovating, and you have to give them, let's say, you offer them new things to keep them interested.
So are these only startups?
No, also regular companies. A lot of medtech innovations are driven by industry, which can be quite aggressive in their marketing and their campaigning. And we're very, very cautious of that. So in our situation, everything goes through the innovation platform. And often big companies are, let's say, disencouraged to bring all kinds of expensive stuff on the market. And the smaller startups bring the interesting stuff.
But if a commercial party, a bigger company, if they approach you, so we have something new, you would like to introduce that in your hospital, then they go through the innovation platform.
Yeah, and the questions there are always the same, and it's all been tested with Mentimeters, which you guys are aware of as well, I saw. So what we do is they can present their idea, and then we ask them a few questions. Is this useful for a patient? Does a patient benefit from this innovation? Does the doctor benefit from this innovation? Does the staff benefit from this innovation? Does it take more time or less time? Does it make healthcare more efficient or more expensive, yes or no? And these very strict questions have to be answered. And if there's a certain percentage positive by the Mentimeters, then we will go for the next step. But a lot of them fail in the first talk.
That's very interesting. So this specific innovation, what was it about?
Well,
COVID
hit us very hard, and university education stopped completely. While our surgical education is based on, let's say, live surgeries and also live procedures outside the operation room. So we needed a device to educate our students and to let them have more or less the experience of live surgery or live procedures in the hospital. And that's why this wireless, very high-tech headset was developed by Crescent Med. And these guys, it's wireless, it's on a battery which lasts for hours, and you can make several movies with them. And it's also an interactive device. So the people can ask you a question and you can answer it. It's all streamed to any part of the world.
And I think I saw that this company started out also in an EIT Health support program. I think the Launch Lab program. How long ago was that? Do you know? When did they start, and when did?
I think the program was in 2019. I asked them yesterday, and they said we were in a kind of incubator setting at EIT Health. And we were sponsored by them, and they were they did a great job.
Someone is asking, could you write down in the chat the name of the platform? So that's Luca. I think you mean the innovation platform that Maarten has organized in its hospital. Is that what you mean, Luca? Where are you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the name of the platform was Innovation Platform. And I think, Maarten, how many people are in that innovation platform?
It depends on the topic, it depends on the pitches, but we invite people who are dealing with proposed startups. So for instance, if they make something for ear, nose and throat surgery, we invite all ear, nose and throat surgeons and all nurses from the ear, nose and throat department. So sometimes it's 50 people, sometimes it's 10 people. But that's an ecosystem. You have to be dynamic in that. So you have to pick the people you want to be present when the startup pitches.
And do you also have, I don't know, the financial director in there?
Yeah, the
people
financial
who need
director,
to make the decisions.
Yeah, financial, and also very important, the ICT guys and the privacy officers of the hospital. Because it all has to do with also data of patients. And Pekka will go into that, I think, more than I can. But we think the privacy officers and the legal people are also important. But the first idea is to be very positive towards innovative startups and to listen to them and to advise them. So the positive, innovative attitude is very important.
Okay. And you said that they can also get a bit of money.
Yeah, we have a fund. We have a research fund, which has about 100,000 euros a year to spend on this kind of things. And also we are supported by the managers of the hospital because we have a secretary, innovation secretary, who invites all startups, does the Mentimeters, and also supplies the startups with the results of the evaluation and stuff like that. Because every startup which has pitched with us gets a notification within a week of the result of the evaluation of the whole innovation platform.
And the money they can spend on setting up an experiment or something, or make a prototype, or
often this prototype, or as a first customer will buy a first example and stuff like that. So that's the money is for different purposes, but they give a good reason, and then we'll pay them some money, no problem. But most of them really want to talk to doctors, or they want to talk to experienced nurses to see whether their concept is a viable concept or not. So it's not only about money, it's also about, does my idea work? Do you see it a possibility to include it in your daily activities and stuff like that?
Okay, great. I think for now, unless there are any further questions from the participants, and otherwise they can come later as well, but because we come back to Maarten as well. But then I would like to go to Pekka now. So Pekka has a bit of a different setup as a living lab, where Maarten has, say, the entire hospital as the living lab. So Pekka focuses more on the software side of it. And you had some slides to share with us, right, Pekka? Maybe you can take the screen.
Thanks, Roel. So I'll just introduce very briefly what our activities around taking data into use extensively in the hospital has, how the path has gone. There also the idea is that the entire data repository or entire data lake that we have is available for these kinds of innovations. Of course, with respectful of the regulation and the privacy aspects. So trying to share my screen. So just if you can confirm that you can see my presentation.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So about 7 years ago, there was a strategic decision from the hospital that we need to somehow start working with our data. And there were sort of 3 essential steps. I don't know, I was not involved in the early stages, whether these were explicitly defined then, but these are like retrospectively looking, the 3 things we need to really concentrate on. One is that you have to really get on top of the clinical data in the hospital. I'll talk very briefly about that. Then about partnering with different kinds of organizations. The hospital cannot take benefit. They don't possess all the competencies, all the technical capabilities, not even all the ideas of how the data could be used. So somehow have to create a flexible way of engaging with different kinds of organizations, be they public or private, be they multinational corporations or SMEs in the market. And then the third one is to avoid the big translation gap that the results would be useful in the clinical processes at scale. So try to think about how these can be deployed very early on. And this is where our ecosystem is trying to find ways to working with. If looking at a big hospital like ours, so clinical data of different kinds have been accumulating into the operative systems for decades. So there are huge amounts. And just to give you a reference, so the size of our hospital group, so we are the public provider of care for 1.7 million inhabitants in the Uusimaa region, meaning that it's a fairly big operation, and there are about 35 years of accumulated data. But historically, this has been locked into operative system. So the one big data infrastructure reform that was done, that we built a data lake, a system that extracts all data from the primary systems and makes it available for secondary use. So meaning research, innovation, and other sort of topics than their primary purpose. Then it's about coming into an ecosystem, and we call this the Clever Health Network, trying to label it in a way that it's not HUS ecosystem. Even though we are a core partner as a clinical unit in this, it's something that is collaboration platform for different kinds of ecosystem partners that are interested in developing new data-driven solutions that help the patients, the healthcare delivery, and that can be then transferred into sustainable business. And again, this needs to be fairly flexible, and the idea is that we bring together different kinds of partners and engage them with the clinical needs that are arising in the hospital. And there is a process of collecting, analyzing, and discussing these clinical needs within the ecosystem. And the sweet spot is always when you find an important and pressing clinical need that is like for the physicians and the clinical departments is causing them to lose sleep. And then there are technology and data opportunities that could help in solving these. So then there is a sweet spot where we try to build projects around, where then the parties that are needed within the core ecosystem or other stakeholders would come together and develop solutions based on this. And there are some examples of ongoing projects. And I could share later a little bit concrete cases if you want to continue. But this is the basic idea. So work around data, try to identify important and pressing needs from the clinic, and then come together with a highly competent consortium of partners and together solve this topic. It's not purely research because it's very, very much focused around a need, but it's not purely a sort of procurement or purchasing activity because it's co-development. The hospital is an active partner in developing the solution. And often the idea is that we as a hospital would then adopt the solutions into our own clinical use, and the companies would not really have a business by selling it to us, but they would then get their business from selling it to other hospitals in their interest. But that's very briefly about our approach to ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. So that is a very interesting platform you have there. But we try to challenge each other here in the drive training community with to talk about the how, because it's, and I would like to challenge you on, it's easy to put logos on a slide and it's an impressive set of logos. But how does it work? Can you say a bit more about that? So how do you bring the people together from these organizations so that actually the people developing the services, maybe then for other hospitals than yourselves, but how do they get to understand what the pressing needs are of the doctors and nurses that they lose sleep over? So how does that work?
There are, in fact, 3 different types of processes that we run. One is that our coordination team, so there is a team from our hospital and then a consultant that is helping us. So they actively discuss and browse the clinical departments of trying to find the needs, and also the level of enthusiasm in trying to attack these needs, because there's a need for you have to have both. You have to have the need and then you have to have the drive. So there is this ongoing discussion with the clinical departments by the coordination team. Then when there are some sort of initial topics or ideas where these are identified, they are brought into a setup we call the Clever Health After Work, meaning it's a session. It used to be physical session in a health hub.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah, but now it's been online and it works pretty well. So it means that all the partners are coming together, and then there are certain presentations from the clinic side, and then there are certain presentations from the partners side about what kind of capabilities they have, and then it's like an open a call. Anyone who would be interested to work towards this further, so needs to take action, and then the coordination team will facilitate the discussion of joint planning, and then it's important to have also resourcing and funding thought about, how would this be funded, and we fortunately have quite good relations with the ecosystem or the R&D Innovation Funding Agency, which is supporting this activity. So there is this preparatory phase for projects. So that's mainly what we're trying to do, and then things come concrete in a project. So a subset of partners come together and start working on a project.
So this is an open sharing session about ideas and maybe of products and services in a very early phase, or of needs, and you just openly discuss these with each other.
With the ecosystem partners, that's right.
Yep.
So the idea is that we try to give the ecosystem partners a safe and trusted environment to share these ideas on certain level. Of course, you're not putting everything forward in these sessions, but still, and then the ecosystem is open in a sense that if we see that there are, or the group of people who start then more working on the problem, they see that we don't possess all the competencies here, so they can engage anyone from the outside, but that's like based on the need to come together for the project.
Yeah. Okay, and I think this requires quite a level of trust in that group of collaborators, right? So
absolutely, that's one of the key things.
Do you have contracts for that, or did that grow, or can you say a few words about that?
There is a very simple sort of ecosystem contract, which is about the basic rules and how do we work within the ecosystem. But that does not define too much. I think the basis for this is partially in the Finnish or the Nordic, societal trust. People tend to trust each other, and you can do a fair amount of interaction without formalizing it into a detail. It's also about being fairly small, meaning people know each other. Maybe they have worked with each other for a while. You know that these people are trustworthy. It's about people. I think it's very much about people. And then it is about balancing the sort of business view of it, not being present but not being too aggressive, meaning that the clinical teams also see that it's not just a business angle that is trying to be pushed, but still keeping the idea that if this comes into something, there is business potential for the partners who are involved. So it's a balancing act on that sense.
Are patients involved, Pekka?
Patients are involved, of course, when we go into a project defining a patient group, then the patients will come involved. There are discussions that how much should we engage patient already in the sort of early stages. It's quite abstract discussions in the early stages, but that might be something that we're willing to enforce. But when you go into a project, yes, then the patients will be involved as well.
And I think you're in a very nice situation if you have some budget available as well for follow-up activities. I think we would all like to have that. So is it absolutely necessary to have budget available for that, or would there be other ways to give follow-up to an idea that you have together that's coming from such a session?
No, I think this kind of activity needs resources. It doesn't have to be big. Budgeting is a mechanism of also of every single time giving an acid test whether this is like important enough for the parties. So all the ecosystem members, they bring in a small annual fee, which gives a small budget for the coordination.
Oh, okay.
Which sort of makes the coordination resources available. And then when it comes to project preparation, so the need and the opportunity has to be important enough that everybody is willing to invest. It's in kind, invest time and effort into making it a viable project proposal. But then it requires money, of course. It requires money to be executed. But I think it's important that the economic part is always included. It doesn't have to be big, but it makes it somehow serious when there is small economic angle to it.
Yeah, I think there was a remark, but I think that was by accident. Someone coming in. But again, if there are other questions for the speakers, then be sure to tap in. Let me open up the floor now for some questions, because we have had 2 introductions now, to see if there are any questions coming up at the moment about how to work on this. Is there any questions? I know from the participants that there's always a lot of questions on how do we do living labs. Now's the time. And if not, we will go forward to another example. But I just want to make sure that there's no question at the moment. Okay, maybe then, Maarten, let's go to your next example. I think it's quite illustrative to have this next one. Maybe you can introduce it a bit and how it differs from the previous startup-related example.
So the first video I showed was with a small startup, a small-scale study for an inexpensive headset, which was 3D printed with a simple camera. Great results, but not a lot of money, not a lot of hassle, and tested it in a practical situation. And now we go to something completely different. Now there's Philips, which is a tech giant, well-known all over the world, who wanted to test a new way of analyzing workflow in a hospital. And they had a very, very, let's say, ambitious plan. They wanted to make movies of every single procedure in operation rooms and catheterization rooms for heart catheterization. And then they wanted to throw in a lot of artificial intelligence, a lot of smart algorithms, and they would like then to develop a system which could improve workflow in hospitals, make hospitals more efficient and better financial results. So they wanted to construct a system which they could sell in any hospital in the world. So then there's a different player and a different playing field, because it's making movies in a hospital is a very, very difficult thing because of privacy of both patient, workers, and other people walking around. So we had to go through all kinds of legal issues. It took us 1.5 years, and it took us a lot of money to get to a kind of results I will show you in a few seconds. And then, but it does show how high-tech involvement of artificial intelligence in healthcare is coming to all of us, and we cannot avoid it, and we have to work with it. So that's why our innovation platform decided we wanted to go into a certain, we wanted to go along with it up to a certain standard. We would like to preserve privacy for patients, workers, and we also would like to see whether artificial intelligence could improve our daily workflow in our hospital. And that's why we started this project, which is called the Workflow Project. Maybe we could start the video now. So heart catheterizations procedures were filmed, hundreds and hundreds, with informed consent of patients and all workers. And then we tricked around a little bit with the videos. That's what I wanted to show you. We attached so-called sticky figures, which are the colored lines on the people. And they are to be analyzed by algorithms to see what people are doing, how much movement they make, the distance they cover, but also the task they perform. And then you come to very interesting results. Maybe you can start it. It's all about safety, and it's all about X-rays during a heart catheterization. And if you see at the left, the computer gave us the advice to look at this protection screen, because the computer detected the problems the cardiologist has with this protection screen, with positioning it, which we did not realize prior to that. But look what she's fooling around with. It takes ages. It doesn't work well. Maybe it's not so well designed as we all think. And the computer attended to us. The other thing is, what you could see in the video, is an open door. And an open door is strictly forbidden when using X-rays. So analyzing these videos, hundreds of them, gave us a very interesting ideas of improving safety and efficiency in this process.
So instead of someone, a consultant or a student or a researcher, being in your operation theater with a notebook, writing down what they are seeing, you automated the need finding process. Is that what you're saying?
We're doing both now because we want to validate the process. And that's where I come back to evidence. I would say you're not in there as a doctor or a hospital to develop expensive systems for any medtech giant. You're in there to improve healthcare technology and patient safety. So the first thing is to validate these systems and to build them, to validate the algorithms. So now we're doing double. There's a student in the room with a notebook, but in the end, the camera will do the job. The algorithm will give the advice and will signal when something is happening. We think we, for instance, could improve safety of workers by improving behavior with X-rays. As you all probably are aware, taking distance from X-rays is a safe thing, but a lot of workers, because they're hasty and they're busy, don't take enough precautions and don't take the necessary distance. So think about a system which will notify the worker of the fact that it's too close to the source of X-rays, and thereby improving safety for workers and patients. So it all has to, when we have gathered the evidence, we will have a system where patients and workers will benefit from, and eventually Philips may sell it to any hospital, but then it's that's the last part we think is interesting.
So the product or the service that Philips is developing then is to provide safety measures to other hospitals, and
but also efficiency. If you see a lot of people doing nothing, or if you see one person doing all the work and others are resting, maybe you could distribute your task in a different way or optimize the collaboration between all the workers in the room. And I must say, the result which the computer pointed out of the LED screen, which was a problem, was an eye-opener for us, because now we can change the design of the protective LED screen and make it easier to apply. Small steps.
But a great example, so thank you. And so you raised the topic of students. So I wanted to ask, what is the role of universities and the collaboration you have with, I mean, you're now a professor at TU Delft since I think 2 or 3 years, but you've been collaborating with the TU Delft and other universities for a long time. So what's the added value of collaboration for you as a surgeon?
That's a good question, but our angle is evidence, getting evidence and doing research. So for instance, Philips has to pay for 2 PhD students for 4 years in order to do this project. So we always combine our experiments with research, and if possible, we connect it to PhDs who who describe the results and make them, yeah, let's say, transparent and open to the whole society. So we think writing articles about our work and showing our work around the world on conferences is a very important part of the work.
And you should, and for that you need collaborations with the university, or can you do that yourself?
Yeah, you need collaborations with universities to have the students around, because they come in. Some of them are there for 10 weeks, some of them are there for 10 months, and other PhDs are there for 4 years. I would like to, I don't know how it is with the other participants of this meeting, but in our country, PhDs are very expensive. A PhD for us costs about 350,000 euros for 4 years. So we want the big companies to pay that money before we start the experiments.
Okay. Yeah, that's what we all like to see.
Yeah, but we have to. We want the money in advance. So we are very strict about our experiments and in our living lab. We want absolutely sure that it's been paid for and things are arranged in a positive, transparent manner. We don't deal with bad regulations. We all do it in complete transparency and also tax related in a very clear and real setting.
Okay, thank you. And talking about big companies, maybe that's a nice angle to go back to Pekka. With your consortium, also with, I mean, there's some very nice companies part of your platform. Maybe you could share one of the examples coming from your platform, the type of products or services that you're developing.
Yeah, thanks. I have 2 examples here, which are very different in nature, but they both stress maybe the same type of importance of finding the right problem to work with. So really stressing about the need, the clinical need or the process need that is in the clinical departments. And when it comes to data and algorithms and artificial intelligence, so we have to be very honest that there's lots of hype and crap around that as well. So there are things that are happening everywhere. Everybody's talking about it. But really the difficult part about data and algorithm development is that it requires a lot of pre-work before you can sort of see whether you're able to produce some viable results. Which means that you should really be careful about not doing some trivial clinical needs, even though it might be technologically interesting, and you might not want to do things that are clinically very valid but technologically impossible or data-wise impossible to do. So finding this match is really critical. I have here two sort of examples very briefly about projects that we're working with. I'm sharing my screen now.
It's coming up. Yeah.
Great. So the first clinical need is around patients coming into the emergency and with some sort of a head problem, and the standard procedure there is to get head CT, but as we know, at least in Finland, but I think in overall, there is a shortage of radiologists, especially on-call radiologists, outside the normal working hours, which would be needed in this sort of acute settings. And certain type of head hemorrhage can be fairly difficult to detect from a head CT scan, and the consequences of misdiagnosis can be really severe, meaning that if there is a certain type of hemorrhage that is undiagnosed or misdiagnosed and the patient is discharged, so majority of these patients die in a rebleed in less than 1 year. And this is a very important and pressing clinical need, which really the neurosurgical and acute departments, really a difficult thing to tackle. And there, it was very fruitful to try to find algorithms that could help in the decision making from head CT scans, immediately when the patient is there, even without the radiologist being able to verify the finding. So there is a set of algorithms that are developed from large amount of annotated head CT scans, and then these algorithms are packaged together and validated and documented, so to an extent that they can be certified as medical devices, meaning that the outcome of this project is not just research showing that this is possible, but it's in fact putting forward applications or algorithms that can be registered and brought to the market, which for a hospital is not the main goal. We are not becoming commercial actors, but in order to deploy it in scale in the clinical workflow, so the product has to be available in the market according to the medical device regulation. And this is what we're doing together in this particular project with two big companies, one IT company and one medical device vendor. And we're hopeful that the certification of these algorithms will be completed this year or very early next year, making them available on the market. So an important clinical problem, and then trying to make a fairly long lasting R&D, research and development into making it available.
Mm-hmm.
The second example is a bit another domain. It's around rare diseases, which are in a big hospital, specialized hospital like ours. It's quite a big part. So there are lots of rare diseases with individual patient groups are small, but in total they contribute to quite a big part of university hospitals treatment and patients and expenditure. And the problem in this, the clinical problem in this context has been that these rare diseases are diagnosed too late, because the rare disease specialists are scarce. So patients that have some symptoms, some diagnoses, some different kinds of referrals in the system, they are not finding their way to the right rare disease specialist, but they are bouncing in the healthcare system, and often their condition might become chronic and causing permanent problems to the health of the patient. And now the idea is that how could we somehow identify these patients bouncing in the healthcare service as potential rare disease patients and refer them or point them to a rare disease specialists with a good enough false negative rate, so that the rare disease specialists are not flooded with false alarms. And this is a research project that is starting, and regulatory wise, this is a very challenging topic. But our hospital also is seeing that it's such an important clinical problem and causing such a lot of problems for these rare disease patients that we really need to work within and even in the boundaries of the regulatory frameworks to see how these patients could be identified and helped. So it's partially a technology program, but it's also very much about what the current rules and regulations allow and how we can work with these topics in the regulatory setting.
Great, thank you. So you raised the topic of regulatory, and on the other hand, we have also, say, research here and development. So you always have at the start of a project, there's this, say, fuzzy front end of innovation. You are just exploring some ideas together. And at what stage do you think you should start to take into account in this project development the regulatory setting? So the conditions for that. So can you first try a few things out, test something, and then look at regulatory, or do you need to do it really at the beginning, but then maybe you make the project too strict, or what's your experience with that?
I think that there is no general rule yet for that, other than that the regulatory framework in Finland, which has certain sort of national characteristics compared to the European, it allows, of course, certain feasibility to be explored about the data. You know, what kind of patients there are, what kind of data elements there are, which can be done as a sort of feasibility study by the hospitals, data analysts. But really, the regulatory part has to be started quite early. It's just a fact of life. And as Maarten referred earlier, it's getting more and more difficult and strict, meaning that we need to have some sort of support, professional support for the researchers in navigating this environment. You can't just say that here are the instructions you need to follow and try to survive, but there has to be expertise, advice, and support in navigating this, especially when you combine data, you combine interventions to patients, you combine retrospective and prospective stuff. It's really, really complicated, maybe even biological specimen or genomics. So it's like really, really messy, but it can be navigated, but it needs specialized people helping that.
And are these, say, medical lawyers, or what type of specialists are we thinking of then? Privacy officers? What type of specialization is that?
It needs multiple specialties. So privacy officers are important, legal people are important. However, we should not maybe externalize it to legal people alone, because at least we tend to find that if looking at the legal frameworks, as said, so it's so complicated that if you want to find something that forbids or stops you from proceeding, you can find one. So it really needs like a solution-oriented attitude, not compromising or being like on the gray area, but seeing that what can be done and then working on top of that. But I think that it needs the spirit of assessing the risks and the potential benefits, and then working with the regulatory side, cross disciplines.
So I know that many of the risk hubs of the participants, that they're exploring whether they will extend or set up a living lab completely, or build one further. So I wanted to come with some tips as well. I want to ask Maarten and Pekka on certain topics, how they could proceed in talking with their supervisors and management and regional stakeholders, and what to bring forward.
If I could give you some tip also in relation to what Pekka just described, which I fully support. I would say if you start working on research with patients and for instance, new devices or new equipment, then the rules are very, very strict. And we have one golden rule, which is there's no device being entering the hospital without approval of the technical staff and the legal staff. Otherwise, you're in big problems, and that's probably all over Europe. So you have to have a very strict protocol for that, which is easy to make, to be honest. In our hospital, we employ 3 lawyers. One of them is specialized in contracts. For instance, if you deal with Philips, you have to talk with 3 other lawyers from Philips at the other side of the table. But if you talk with a startup, you have to email one lawyer, a young lawyer who's just starting and stuff like that. So you need a good contract lawyer. You need a technical staff who is well aware of the MDR, the medical device regulations, ins and outs. And that's not a big thing. We got a lot of these people. A solution, if I might give you a tip for a solution, because a lot of people think, hey, do I have to employ lawyers and stuff? Very complicated. I would say team up with a technical university, because the technical universities always have to deal with new devices, regulations for use in the let's say not only the clinical but also the commercial setting or other settings and stuff like that. So team up with a technical university, because they have the same let's say they strive for the same goal, a safe introduction of new technology. And they have their own lawyers and their own validation offices and stuff like that.
So that's a very good tip, I think, because we are working on new projects for next year where we need to form consortia that set up a collaboration. So this could be a good topic to collaborate on, find expertise in other institutes.
Yeah. And also the startups, they have their own ways of dealing with technical universities, and they're being assisted by incubator programs. Not only EIT Health, but technical universities have these incubator programs themselves. And that's where a lot of expertise is around. So I would say, think about the resources these people have as well. The universities, the technical universities have multiple ways of helping this research to innovations.
Yeah, it's especially startups and researchers. I think they have resources, but also resourcefulness to try and find solutions for challenges that you have or encounter. Maybe more than the Philipses in this world.
Exactly,
it's a different type of attitude.
But also local, let's say the government or the provincial government or the local authorities, the community, they might be very interested in innovations as well, and they might have some funding for that. If we look at in the Netherlands, we have innovation quarter, we have, let's say 100% or 50% governmental funds and stuff like that, which you can apply for. And it's very useful to have let's say knowledge of or acquaintance with people who know how to get resources and how to raise funds. That's a business in itself.
Maybe some structural funds coming from Europe as well. And now we're talking about money. Maybe Pekka and Maarten, could you say a few words about? Both of you talked about that there are some funds available to either organize the process, but also to do some experiments and actually spending time on these kinds of activities costs money as well, of course. And why is that okay for the hospital management, that you're spending time on this? What's their cost benefit? Return on investment. What do they get back from it? What does your financial director say about you spending time on these types of innovation and not spending it on doing surgery?
Well, if I might go first, then I would say that an innovative image and a collaboration with a technical university is a good marketing instrument for any hospital. Any hospital wants to have a positive, innovative image. That's one thing. The other thing is that you should be a little bit commercial when you run a living lab. So what we do is we price everything. If there's blood samples to be taken, we price it. If an analyst is in the laboratory working for experience for 2 hours, we price it. we don't believe in in-kind contribution because that costs a lot of money at the other side. You know, if I'm working in kind for experiment, I cannot operate patients, so it costs a lot of money. So you have to be really aware of what things cost. If a lawyer spends 2 hours, it's 800 euros or anything else. So you have to be aware of the money you're spending doing your experiments.
And you price that to the startup?
No, it depends. Startups don't have a lot of money, so they don't tend to pay a lot. But the big companies, they have to pay. I already told you that a PhD costs a lot of money for 4 years, and we want the money in advance, and then they can work with us. But do think about one thing. As doctors and as hospital workers like Pekka and managers, we have a product these companies can not get anywhere else in the world because they have access to a structured way of acquiring data and a structured way of testing things in a structured environment, which is completely safe for patients, completely legally accepted, and also gives high quality data and high quality publications and PhDs programs, stuff like that. So we should be aware of the product we represent as hospitals and staff.
Maybe Pekka, can you say about the cost benefits? So why is that? Why is the hospital management willing to invest in offering these services?
Well, I think first of all, so for an academic hospital, so these types of activities somehow belong to the nature and the DNA of the campus. Of course, previously the focus has been on medical research and diagnostic research and pharmaceutical research, but I think that data and medical devices in this context, they fit into the picture quite nicely. We also, of course, harnessing data for the use of a hospital. It's not only for this type of innovation and collaborative actions. The hospital has selfish and internal needs of being able to use its data for all kinds of operative reporting and other needs. And we have been using this innovation angle also as a catalyst and driver for our infrastructure development. So the same infrastructure of data serves our internal, very operative needs, and we've been able to build it and also get financing from innovation funders in order to do it. So it's like combining the internal needs of the hospital into these external opportunities and collaborative settings. Because at least in Finland, the financing bodies are a little bit one-eyed sometimes. You know, there's a business innovation funding which are interested only in building business or growth companies, and then there's the health funders that are interested only in making access and quality better, but nothing about collaborative. So we need to somehow find where these two can be joined, and data and digital development is in fact quite well in this junction at the moment, but it needs to be well justified every single year. You know, the budget negotiations are quite tough, so you have to show that this is worth the money. We've been delivering results. It's building our image.
What is results? What is results for them, for the university management? How do they see that?
They see that there should be things coming that are operatively useful along the line. So not these like big algorithms, but smaller like improvements in the data flows, for example. So we can say that we've been able to do this as part of the project. And then, of course, the project results, deliverables, concrete products that can be used. And then also,
they really focus at how can we improve our own mode of operation via this innovation process.
It's an important part of it. I
Yeah.
really have to stress that it's as a purely external innovation or ecosystem activity, it would not fly. It needs also to align with the internal drivers of the hospital.
And I estimate that the hospital is not becoming very rich because of all the IP you're selling or all these things. So that's not why you're into it, or is that, or do you profit financially as well, apart from your more efficient innovation, for your more efficient way of operation?
I think that this could develop into also a source of income for hospitals in those types of projects where the hospital contribution has been really instrumental in making or validating the product. But it's a small steps and more like finding out new ways of doing it. It's not. I think it more has a symbolic effect that this can also be done otherwise, and we're in the early stages. I think it's worth keeping in mind that how could this generate small income for the hospital, which would then boost things like further research or further development support activities and so on.
Yeah. Maarten, you wanted to add something? I saw you coming forward, or?
Yeah, well, there's of course a benefit in for hospitals in improving healthcare and efficiency. So it's an implicit benefit. But if you want to make it sustainable, this research and this innovation platform, for instance, you should have a strong drive and some personal drivers. So it's also people's business. I probably Pekka agrees with me on that. So you have to have a few very strong drivers in the hospital and in the management to really go for innovation and want it to work. And you know, you have to pay the rent and you have to pay your gasoline. So it has to make some money in one way or another. Whether it's funding or whether you price your living lab actions or anything, you should be aware of that. That's the only way to build a sustainable ecosystem which develops.
So maybe with that is that one of the most important tips? Try to build your, let's call it coalition of the willing, and yeah, the first people that want to work on this.
A coalition of the willing, and some people want to put energy in it, and also be a little bit commercial. So take care of your household finance. You know, make it work, because Pekka is right. Every year there are discussions on budget and what to cut or what to grow, and you have to be very certain of your funds for the next coming years to make it successful.
I also think that
yes,
maybe one thing to add, we're doing with these types of efforts, we're doing things that we're not 100% sure about the outcomes. So also the way of working has to embrace learning, meaning learning from things that you shouldn't be doing, especially when it comes to data or why not also medical devices, in a way that abandon those types of threads that are early on you see that this will run into difficulties, and not make that as a failure, but it's a learning effort, and embrace the learning and make this like early in the process, trying to abandon ideas also, not because they are bad, but because they might have too much, you know, stumbling stones in front of them.
I think I don't have any further questions. I'm looking around again at the participants. I see Alex. Yeah.
Yeah. So first, let me just introduce myself quickly. I'm Roel's colleague in the Drive training program. I work at the Delft Center for Entrepreneurship at TU Delft. So I'm very much embedded in the local entrepreneurship ecosystem. So I really love, Maarten, what you're doing as a great initiative. We're really looking forward to meeting you, but at some point in time. But here's a question to you both, which is, we kind of, split the whole conversation into two lines, startups and sort of big corporations, right? But have you noticed, or have you tried seeing if there's any synergy between the two? So any programs or initiatives that would involve both a big corporation and sort of very motivated teams, startup teams?
If I may answer, we did always try to form consortia, to arrange to reach out for grants and stuff like that. So we are well aware of combining different possibilities. But Alexander, you have to think of the practical fact that there's often a cultural difference between the two groups. And let's say that the startups, if I might describe that, are open, eager, enthusiastic about working together and sharing knowledge and sharing experiences. The big companies often look at it as a little bit more closed manner and what's in it for me. So if you can combine these cultures and you can deal with that, which we are able as a living lab, then you can be successful. But be aware of the cultural differences, okay?
And Pekka?
I fully agree. So I think the art of putting together consortia that can work on it is really, really important. Also being a bit mindful that what kind of role are you putting to a small company, because sometimes for them it might be more beneficial that they take like more an operative role and being sort of working in the subcontractor mode, meaning that they would get real income for their work instead of a grant, which is often something that they've been using a lot, at least in Finland. Some of the startups, they are like the innovation funders don't look at them very, very positively anymore. But in what kind of role do you put a small company in? Also being mindful that the big companies need to be serious about the collaboration, not only like having their hand on the pulse and trying to see what can we use out of this and bring in some in kind or how would I put it? But you know what I mean. But it's possible to combine, definitely, and I think it's very fruitful also combining these two. And it's a learning process for both the startups and the big company representatives in being part of such a project.
So I repeat my tip to the audience, and that's team up with a technical university, because they know how to deal with all these people and these cultures.
And so Alex said something for you to do that, but coming from the technical university, but does it answer your question? Is this...
Yes, I'm always looking for that. I know for that I almost always think of corporations and startups as oil and water, but on the other end, there are things that are both bringing to the table, and I'm always looking for a nice ways to think of trying to combine the two. But yeah, that definitely answers my question. Thank you.
I think it's also what Maarten described as the 18-month negotiation with Philips, and that's not a timeline you can discuss with startups, right? So it's challenging to combine it. Any other questions coming up?
Yes, can I have two questions?
Sure. Hi, Daya.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I have two questions. The first one is that who is the responsible manager for living labs and for these processes you describe? So who is the responsible top manager in a hospital and in a university? And the other question is that we have the experiences that normally hospital want to buy a new technology because working on that's a lot of effort, energy, human resources, which is too complicated and too much energy for them. So what is your opinion that hospitals want to buy new technologies compared to work on?
Maybe Maarten first.
Okay, the responsible manager is our innovation manager, which is just below the managing director. Reports directly to the director of the hospital and the financial director. So it's way up high in the organization. That's important. It's a good question. It's important to place the manager high, to be high in the ranks. The second question is that you can play a different role. It's not just one role of customer and buying technology. You can also co-create or validate or do other things. And that's the nice idea about a university hospital or a hospital like our hospital, that's been already accepted. That is not only buying a brand new, already completely finished technology, well proven, but it's also about co-creating, validating studies and stuff like that. That's a living business, to be honest.
Pekka?
Well, I'm not wanting to repeat what Maarten said. I fully agree. So in our hospital, it's the chief digital officer who is working directly under the managing director of the hospital. Buying stuff is an important part, and it's big volumes. We also see that these dual roles of co-developing and it should be there as well, and maybe work with the procurement practices so that maybe the procurement could also be a little bit more innovative from time to time. Not in big bulk products, no, but when there is something new that could be coming, for example, during the contract period, how can you involve and include that into the contract? So it's good dialogue that is needed with the procurement people, but it also requires that the procurement departments have this sort of idea in their head that innovation is one tool in their work as well.
Yeah, so I think I understand.
Sorry, can I make one more remark, Roel?
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
And that's, if you want to be successful in innovating in your hospital, then you should have clear ownership of the projects. So you need a very clear project management. If you want to develop something for a surgeon, you should involve a surgeon. If you want to involve anything for a pediatrician, you should involve a pediatrician, and be very clear about the ownership and also the timeline, and also about, let's say, reporting on the study. So transparency, well-documented studies and reporting are very important measures as well. Thank you.
Okay, Bea?
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was very valuable.
Okay, thank you. So I would also like to go to the closure of the session, but I would like to thank Maarten and Pekka a lot for sharing all of their insights. I think it was very useful and practical on how to do this. And also what's in it for you and for me and for everybody involved in the project. And I think Bea's last question was also very important about that it can be a hassle to do innovation. You can also just buy stuff. And I think this also comes back to a discussion we have more and more in Drive as well. So it's also about culture. It's also about to have a culture of innovation in your hospital where this is appreciated, to work on innovation, to try out new stuff, to sometimes take a bit of a risk. You don't know what's really coming out of such a project, and it costs time and hassle with lawyers, and it might be destructive, but it's also worthwhile in the longer run. You will improve your processes, you will create your ecosystem, you will raise the marketing level of your hospital, as Maarten was saying. People would like to work there. That's also very important, that it's fun and nice to do, and it will actually deliver results as well. So with that, I would like to close up the session. Maarten, Pekka, thank you very much for your participation in this session. We will share the movies and the slides with the participants, if you're okay with that.
Yeah. Sure.
And so that they can reach them and make use of them. With that, have a nice day, everybody. And we hope to see you in the next session on technology transfer. That will be the end of October. Sorry, in November.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.